Om Jnanatimirandhasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guroho Shri Yuta Kamalam Shri Guru Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gourangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Namo Mahavadanyaya Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namne Gaura Tishe Namaha Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhya vacha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Okay, yeah, so we'll begin shortly, but just before that, I just wanted to discuss just with the test. This might seem harsh, but it just is how it is. If you don't turn up to the test, you will just fail module 1. So everyone needs to make sure they're there, right? If you can't turn up for some reason or another, just let me know and we can discuss it. If you've got a valid reason, like I'm going to be a little stricter than I normally am, just because it gets hard if everyone's got, I'm just busy on Sunday, sort of as their reason. I've talked to one devotee who'll be doing a tiny bit later, but that was for a pretty extraneous situation. But just as a heads up, ideally you shouldn't be missing any of these classes, but definitely next Sunday when we do the test, turn up, otherwise you won't. I'll allow you to go to module 2, but you'll have to redo module 1 with someone else in order to get your Bhakti-śāstrī certificate. It is what it is, right? The other thing is you will need to turn your video on. I'm not going to let people do the test without their video on, and also preferably actually without the virtual background. So be in a room where you're happy to have your video on and have your actual background on, right? And actually ideally, because I want to see people's hands. So yeah, so I'm just giving all of this as a heads up, just as a preparatory thing. So next week, it doesn't matter if you're not on time, you'll just have less time to do the test. So that's all, right? So turn up whenever you can. But if you don't turn up, yeah, you'll have to redo this whole module. But yeah, if you can, like, we all see how, yes, Hare Krishna, Jaswanth. We all see how Katyayani, Mataji, and Srinivas Prabhu, how they, wait 1 second. Yeah, we all see how they have their sort of setup, right? Where Mataji's in the back riding. Hare Krishna. That's what ideally everyone should be like for the test. Okay, so then we can see. We all see Katyayani Mataji. She's always writing down notes furiously.
Now we got a backside table set up for Mataji Prabhuji. So
yeah,
she will be sitting on there, turning on that side, and I'll be.
Okay. Jai. As long as I can just see that you're writing it by hand, then I'm fine. Yeah. So just really would like everyone to be prepared in that direction, just because, yeah, I just want it to go smoothly, right? I don't want any last second, oh no Prabhu, I have to type, or oh no Prabhu, my video can't turn on, because then I'll just fail you. That sounds harsh, but it's not really. I've given you a lot of heads up, so yeah, so please. I know lots of you like to have the video off. I'm totally fine with that normally in the class, but definitely for the test, everyone has to have video on.
Prabhu,
yes?
How do we submit the papers to you? Whatever we have written?
So then at the end, if you can if you have your phones, if you can take a photo of what you've written, and then just send it to me on WhatsApp, if that works. Will that be an issue for anyone?
Shouldn't be, for me at least.
I'm assuming everyone has a phone.
I
Yeah.
assume that the picture gets sent within half an hour or something.
Oh no. I like send the picture like during the Zoom thing. Yeah. Like I want to see you taking the photos, and then I want my phone to be going vroom vroom vroom, right?
There are a few apps,
yeah.
Prabhuji. There are few apps. It gives a clear picture instead of just taking the photo.
Office lens.
Yeah.
Office lens, Prabhuji.
Jai. So if everyone wants to do that, even I'm fine if people aren't so tech savvy. I would prefer that. But if people aren't so tech savvy and they just take a photo of the camera, I will accept the tapasya of trying to read the answers. And please, neat handwriting. Please. Don't worry, you have a lot of time. 2 hours is more time than you need. I'm happy for people to just send a message, I'm finished, and then on Zoom. The moment I see keyboards I assume you're done with your test. And then take the photos and send in, you can leave. I don't think most of you will need the 2 hours. If you do, that's fine. Don't get me wrong. Some people are good with these assessments. Some people are good with open book. Nobody's good at shloka test, unfortunately, but definitely the other two. Yeah. So yeah, no shame if you take the whole time. Your handwriting is bad. Look, as long as I can understand it. And anyways, the questions are short. Okay. So does that make sense? Okay. Sorry.
How many questions, Prabhuji?
I won't say. I won't say. But there'll be it won't be difficult. Don't worry. I've written the paper now. Not written. I've just copied and pasted which questions I'm going to ask you. So it's easy. Don't worry.
Prabhu,
yeah.
The KMV test, like, are we going to get few weeks time after this exam, Prabhu? So we are busy preparing for the closed book exam.
No.
Or it's going to be.
It's next week. It's next Sunday.
Oh, it's next. No. KMV.
Sorry?
Key memory versus I'm talking about.
Key memory. Key memory was going to start. I was initially going to do it the Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday after the test, but because we're anyways. No. Don't worry. Calm down. Because we're anyways having a 1 week break after the test. That's normally the Bhakti-śāstrī structure. At the end of each module, you take a week. So I decided I won't let you relax. We'll do the test during that 1 week break. So I'll do it on the Monday. So after this Sunday, you'll have a whole week. And then that following Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. So I'll give you the dates now so it's not confusing.
Okay.
4th, 5th, 6th of April. That's when I will be allocating you your days. And then all of the previous comments I made regarding the shloka test apply. Any doctors here? Well, any doctors are not allowed to use cursive. Only capital letter printing all your answers, please. But no, yeah, I'm not terrible with handwriting. Yeah, okay, so that'll be, I've decided to move it just because I thought it might be too brutal to give you guys the closed book and the shloka test. But then yeah, 4th, 5, 6, you'll have your shloka test. And then on that weekend, on the 10th of April is when we will be resuming classes. So this is the last class until the 10th of April. This next week is a test. The week after that, you'll get to, sleep in on your Sunday. And then on the 10th, we will be resuming and we'll be doing module 2. Okay, is that clear to everyone? Does anyone have any existentials, anything left? It's all right. If you have any questions, I think it's pretty straightforward. Just have the checklist, turn up. That's the important one. Have your webcam and have your paper with you. So if you forgot your paper or something, I'll let you run off, but you'll just miss out on time. Ideally, have your paper with you. And I want to see your hands writing so that you're not, if your hands are invisible, you might be looking things up. Have a phone with you so you can take photos of the test at the end and then send them to me. And then the next test we'll do in person. Yeah, as I said, it was a bit too much of a burden for all of the temples that are, transitioning from COVID and everything. I didn't want to add an extra thing that they have to rush and organize. So all the other ones I'm hoping to be in person. Okay. Are there any questions? Otherwise, we will finish chapter 6. Jai. Okay, let's go ahead with chapter 6. Who can remember what did we get up to last week? I'll start calling people out. Shivam, what did we cover last week? Well, what did we get up to? Not everything. What was the last point we touched?
I'm not too sure. It's like a bit vague in my memory.
Yeah, so we were touching on dhyana yoga. What is the main topic of the chapter dhyana yoga? What is the thing we are discussing for the entire chapter?
Like how to be like better in devotional service?
No. There's one word, it begins with a, and it rhymes with ashtanga. It begins with a and rhymes with ashtanga. What could that be?
I'm not too sure.
Ashtanga.
Oh, okay.
Okay, Ashtanga yoga, right? Ashtanga yoga is the discussion of chapter 6. We got up to the last part of the regulations of Ashtanga yoga, not eating too much, not eating too little, etc., etc. However, what Shivam said is correct. These things are beneficial to us in devotional service, even if we are not executing the Ashtanga yoga process. In fact, our acharyas include dhyana as a wing of, maybe some of us will know, they're the 8 limbs of bhakti. Any kids who've grown up in ISKCON will remember Prahlad Maharaj pastimes. We all were forced to remember Shravana Kirtanam Vishnu Smaranam Pada Sevanam, right? So of these 8 limbs in Smaranam, our acharyas include dhyana, this meditation. So it's not that it's totally useless to us, and most of these things do apply because, as we were touching upon with Srikanta Sena Prabhu's question last week, all of the other forms of bhakti are represented. I mean, all the other forms of yoga are represented in bhakti, right? Maybe not necessarily in their disqualifications or in their regulations, but definitely in their essence, right? In what they achieve, in what benefit they bring. So because of that, I don't want us to think that this is totally irrelevant to us. The relevance, in fact, of the entire first 6 chapters, of which bhakti has only been mentioned very marginally, right? Once we finish today, the last verse of chapter 6 is just bhakti, right in your face bhakti, and then we're going to have 6 chapters of non-stop bhakti. It's going to be a lot of fun. I'm very excited, okay? So it'll be a very big change of pace, right? We'll have bhakti and occasional mentions of other things, whereas so far we've had other things and occasional mentions of bhakti. But those other things have been very relevant because, for multiple reasons. One is that by hearing all of these different things, we'll be able to recognize that bhakti fulfills all of them. Furthermore, we find a situation, we find bhakti being situated in a certain aspect, and we get told the process by which people gradually get drawn towards bhakti, right? Furthermore, we get told, it helps us realize that bhakti is completely independent and supreme, right? So all of these things are here. The contextualization of bhakti is important. And all of these things are important things to understand and can apply to us in devotional service, but we should also understand where they are, okay? So Ashtanga yoga is much the same. These things even apply to us, even the eating too much and eating too little. I still remember I was listening to a class when I was in Mayapur, and Bashu Ghosh Prabhu said, I hate to do this to all of you, but overeating prasadam is still sense gratification. And you can see all of us, our hearts were broken, right? I thought overeating prasadam was how I can progress in spiritual life. And it's true. Better to overeat prasadam than to eat the appropriate amount of non-prasad, right? But even better to appropriately eat right levels of prasadam. But again, these are not relevant to us. And other things are virtually irrelevant. I don't expect any of us to get deerskin and put it on some kusha grass and sit down and chant your rounds, right? Anyway, so we were discussing all of this and we were seeing how regulated Ashtanga yoga is. Krishna consciousness can benefit from regulation, but it does not require it. And this is again why Krishna consciousness is so, or bhakti yoga rather, is so much more practical and relevant for us. Okay, so we discussed the practice of Ashtanga yoga after we discussed the different levels of Ashtanga yoga. What they don't want you to know is that the deerskin thing is a cheat code. Again. Yes, Alex. Alex is saying, I'm trying to trick you all so that you don't know the shortcuts. It would have been really obvious to Arjuna when Krishna was describing this process of dhyana, it wasn't for him. Yes, and we will get exactly to that later on in the 6th chapter. The whole second half of the 6th chapter is Arjuna saying, well, this is very irrelevant to me, right? Arjuna says, well, we'll discuss it when we get to it, right? But Arjuna explicitly says that. Because what's Krishna saying? Krishna saying, look at everyone as if they're all the same. How am I meant to fight in a war if I'm seeing everyone in the same way, right? Arjuna has that very basic question. Krishna, where am I going to sit down? But again, we have to realize 2 things. One is that Krishna begins this chapter by saying, stick to Nishkama Karma Yoga. Now I'm describing how it looks like when you transcend Nishkama Karma Yoga, but still stick to it. So in that sense, Krishna's almost like tangenting, right? He's just trying to say, how does it look like for one who is beyond the Nishkama Karma Yoga stage, right? But at the beginning, remember he says, but Arjuna, stick to action, do action. On the other hand, also for us who are studying it, who aren't being encouraged to do Nishkama Karma Yoga, if any of you leave this session trying to do Nishkama Karma Yoga, just don't, please don't. Go and continue doing Bhakti Yoga, okay? Because the point of this is Krishna's also, actually, our acharyas say Krishna didn't speak the Bhagavad-gītā to get Arjuna to fight, right? Arjuna actually would have fought either way. And we'll touch on why. This is actually hinted towards in the later chapters. Arjuna would have fought either way. Krishna is using this opportunity purely to speak the glories of Bhakti Yoga. Jiva Goswami discusses this. And again, we will touch upon this. It's in chapter 14, if I remember correctly, where our acharyas draw that from. Arjuna would have fought either way. Krishna is speaking all of this simply so that he can glorify Bhakti at the apex of the Mahabharata. He's speaking at this point because this is when everyone is focusing the most on the Mahabharata story, right? And then now what does he do? He says the most important teaching, which is take up to Krishna consciousness. Man mana bhava mad bhakto, right? This is what we want, okay? So the other aspect is, even though it seems irrelevant to Arjuna, Krishna is also saying it so that Arjuna, or so that whoever's hearing, including Arjuna, can realize, oh, Bhakti Yoga is the way to go, right? And it's very explicit. Once we finish the 6th chapter, if anyone comes up to the street and tells you that the Bhagavad-gītā is about sitting down and meditating, you should all be able to smash them, right? Because it's very, very explicit. Even if you don't use Prabhupada's Gita, which I wouldn't recommend, but I'm just saying, just for theoretical, unless you get some really twisted version, if you get a fairly literal one, it's actually relatively obvious still then that Bhakti Yoga is the supreme. Srila Prabhupada just helps you make sure you won't make the mistake of not realizing that, right? But again, please don't take that as an endorsement of other Gitas. I'm just saying, even if you take other Gitas which aren't even written by devotees, as long as they're being relatively accurate to the Sanskrit, it's very hard to avoid the fact that Bhakti is the ultimate goal. Okay, so let's keep on going with the chapter then. And please keep this revised. Because the Ashtanga, the 8 limbs of yoga will be in your test. There's only 2 things I've told you definitely will be in your test. List the 8 limbs of yoga, either in English or in Sanskrit, preferably in English, but you'll get full marks either way, and the signs of victory on the battlefield. Okay, so yeah, if you're feeling a little rusty with last week, definitely watch the video, because I spent a lot of time on it intentionally so that it would be stuck in your heads. Okay. So maybe Mrugank Prabhu, would you like to share your screen? We will begin to proceed then. So we got up to text 17, which is a nice cutoff point, and we will discuss from text 18. Again, as I said, I've removed all the activities I had planned out for this, and we're just going to do another study session at the end of today, if that's fine with everyone. Yeah. Okay, so what we've heard is we've heard the method of Ashtanga yoga practice. We've heard the stages of it, right? Krishna begins in text 10, he discusses perfection, then he discusses how to reach it. And now he's describing practice on the perfected platform in text 18 to 19. For the sake of time, we won't read out the Sanskrit until we reach more towards the end. Just for this section, I don't think there's as much need. Okay, so text 18, maybe we can have Tarun Prabhu, would you like to read out 18? And Shavina Mataji, would you like to read out text 19?
Yes, Prabhu. When the yogi, by practice of yoga, disciplines his mental activities and becomes situated in transcendence, devoid of all material desires, he is said to be well established in yoga.
Text 19. As a lamp in a windless place does not waver, so the transcendentalist whose mind is controlled remains always steady in his meditation on the transcendental self.
Okay, thank you very much. Sorry, I just had a call. I needed to tell them to ring me later. Okay, yep. So what we've discussed here is right now the perfection in Ashtanga Yoga. If we did read out the Sanskrit, we would find the word yukta. Yeah. So yukta is referring to the perfection in Ashtanga Yoga. And what is that like, right? I love this metaphor in text 19, right? I think everyone does. It's a real famous one. It's vivid, right? As a lamp in a windless place does not waver, so the transcendentalist whose mind is controlled remains always steady in his meditation on the transcendent self. So we'll realize here that as part of this, there is self-realization. What we will also see, however, is that there is not just self-realization, but there is further realization. And that is what the later text will discuss. Just as a little side note, I didn't mention this earlier. In text 17, it discusses recreation. Does anyone know what recreation is for the Ashtanga yogi? This is a little extension question in case anyone's done further reading. Does anyone know? In text 17, it mentions recreation. Does anyone know what the Ashtanga yogi's recreation is? It's walking. That's what our acharyas say. So when the Ashtanga yogi wants to have a little bit of fun, he starts walking. Just to give you an idea, I'm not just saying that for fun, but to give you an idea, Ashtanga yoga is very austere. It's very impractical for us. We live in a society where we're being bombarded with phones and movies and everything. You know what I mean? Can we imagine ever having so much control of our having such simple desires that for us walking is our idea of fun? You know what I mean? I mean, today I think with the flooding, everyone in Sydney experienced how much walking is the opposite of fun for us, right? We don't much enjoy walking. Sydney's infrastructure is built around with public transport, is built around the idea of minimizing walking, right? We want to avoid walking, but for the Ashtanga yogi, their lives are so regulated, self-regulated, mind you, are so regulated by themselves. They're so much in self-discipline that walking is their idea of a fun time. So I just wanted to make this point. Ashtanga yoga is very, very difficult. Okay, so we keep on going. We've read about the perfection. Now, when we go to text 20 to 23, this is a long one. So who am I going to have read it out? Maybe Nitai Prabhu, would you like to read out text 20 to 23?
Yeah. In the stage of perfection called trance or samadhi, one's mind is completely restrained from material mental activities by practice of yoga. This perfection is characterized by one's ability to see the self by the pure mind and relish and rejoice in the self. In that joyous state, one is situated in boundless transcendental happiness, realized through transcendental senses. Established thus, one never departs from the truth. And upon gaining this, he thinks there is no greater gain. Being situated in a position, one is never shaken, even in the midst of great difficulty. This indeed is actual freedom from all miseries arising from material contact.
Jai. So here we find a very, very nice description of what samadhi is like, right? So in 18 to 19, we've described almost the practice of the person who's perfected Ashtanga yoga, right? But now in 20 to 23, we hear about what that samadhi is. What is the realization, right? And what is it? It is, this is a description of Brahman realization, basically, right? So when you realize Brahman, this is what you are realizing, okay? And so we find that one is in boundless transcendental happiness, realized through transcendental senses. He never departs from the truth. And upon gaining this, he thinks there's no greater gain, okay? So what we find here is that Brahman description. However, we will go a little further than this, right? There's different attainments for all of the different parts on the yoga ladder. Person who performs karma, yes, Mrugank Prabhu?
Oh, why do we write self with the capital S? Why don't they just say Krishna?
Oh no, because the self isn't even Krishna. The self is the jiva.
Oh.
So self with a capital S, this is a good question. It's a translation of Atman. And it's translated differently because with the lowercase, it can sort of mean like when, you know how we colloquially say yourself, right? And that can refer to the body, the person, etc. When we write self with the uppercase S, it's being explicit. This is the soul, right? This is the Atman.
So what does it mean to relish and rejoice in the self? Like just the like.
Well, that's why this is a more Brahman realization sort of thing, right? Because they've sort of realized they've got self-realization, right? We often put that term in the beginning of sentences, so we don't write it with a capital S, right? But ideally it should be, right? He's self-realized. He's removed himself from material sufferings and he's fully realized his soul, right?
And just that gives you happiness because the soul is by nature happy, is that what?
My understanding is that this happiness is a relative happiness. It's sort of like when we're in kirtan, we say, oh, prabhu, bliss, bliss, ecstasy. None of us are actually feeling bliss and ecstasy, right? Because we're not crying and rolling on the floor, right? We're not actually feeling bliss and ecstasy. But because we are experiencing moments where we are not experiencing suffering, relatively it's joy, if that makes sense.
Okay. Right.
So that's my understanding, but I know our acharyas have different ways of pulling this text apart. But
boundless transcendental happiness. So does that mean it's transcendental in the sense it's apart from the material?
Yeah, it's transcendental to the material world, right?
Okay.
But if we see also it's realized through transcendental senses, we're finding hints because actually this text is building up the Brahman platform, but then it's about to enter into the Paramatma platform.
Okay.
So it sort of gets mentioned here. There are hints of the higher platform as well, because then we'll talk about, after this, we will then discuss more sadhana, more practice. And then from 27 to 28, we discuss like the fullness of the yoga Paramatma realization.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. If you read in the purport, Srila Prabhupada, he discusses this, but it's just a long purport and I can't remember exactly where. But if you read the purport, he'll discuss how it gets broken down in terms of the joy. But I think he also applies it to Krishna consciousness. So yeah, off the top of my head, it's in Prabhupada's purport. Otherwise, it's in one of the Acharya's commentaries. I'll get the exact quote where they break it down because I know they read it differently. Yeah, just off the top of my head, I can't remember the different ways they splice it. But yeah, no, boundless transcendental happiness, there are hints of Paramatma because one attains samadhi, but it's not an impersonal samadhi. This description of joy in the self is primarily Brahman. But yeah, when we start talking about transcendental senses, there is a certain level of that. So you can read it both ways, is basically what I'm saying. And that's the confusing aspect of these sections of the Gita. You can read this whole thing as talking about bhakti. In context, that's a bit of an awkward reading. Even Prabhupada doesn't do that, and he reads bhakti wherever he can, right? But yeah, because we're reaching the final point, more and more there's hints towards bhakti, there's hints towards bhakti coming up and up and up. There's hints, and therefore there's also hints to Paramatma. Yeah. So you can read it in different ways, if that makes sense.
Yeah, thank you.
It's just the complexities, especially these first 6 chapters of the Bhagavad-gītā. Like there's so many different ways to read it. That's why I feel like they're actually the hardest ones, because we're having to think on all these different levels. But yeah. Yeah. So, okay, let's keep going then. So in 24 then, we now read about the means by which this state of samadhi is realized. No, it is in Prabhupada's purport. I remember now. He describes the two types of samadhi, and he talks about how this is a joy which comes from being transcendental to all this happiness of the senses. Because one uses the internal senses, that's what it means if we refer to it as Brahman realization. So in 24, we have the method by which one attains this yoga rudha stage, right? So we've sort of gone back, we've talked about samadhi, and so we have this sort of back and forth in this section. Krishna, he describes the perfection, then he describes the method. He describes the perfection, he describes the method. This is the final part now where we hear a methodology. And it's 24 to 26. So in 24, we hear that one should engage oneself in the practice of yoga with determination and faith and not be deviated from the path. One should abandon, without exception, all material desires born of mental speculation and thus control all of the senses on all sides by the mind. Now, what's needed is Krishna, he's mentioned something rather interestingly. He's mentioning here with great determination and faith. Krishna is still trying to scare Arjuna away, to come back to Srikanta Sena Prabhu's point, right? He's still trying to scare Arjuna away. He's still saying, this is a very difficult process because one requires incredible determination and faith in order to reach this point through the Ashtanga Yoga method, right? This is incredibly difficult, okay? And we must remember this because this isn't just some point we're building up for Bhakti Yoga. This is all, or even for our practical application. Krishna is going to come to this point right when he finishes the chapter, okay? The idea that this is difficult is essential to the conclusion he draws. Because then what does he say in text 25? Aina, chyna, right? What am I saying? Shanai, shanai, right? Step by step, gradually, step by step, one should become situated in trance by means, chyna. Oh yeah, I thought I mispronounced it and then I realized it was a joke. Shanai, right? Step by step, one should become situated in trance by means of intelligence sustained by full conviction, right? So step by step, with great endeavor. Krishna, he is not beating around the bush. This is difficult. You don't say step by step when it's something like, I don't know, something easy, right? Nobody says step by step, you get into your Uber, but they do say step by step, you walk over to the direction. You get what I mean? Nobody says step by step with an easy process, right? You know that famous saying, right? The journey of 1,000 miles begins with one step or something. I forgot how the saying goes, right? Nobody says that about going to the fridge, right? Step by step is emphasizing that this is difficult, right? And then we hear in text 27. So Krishna, almost he's mentioning this just to clarify again, the means by which you reach this platform is very, very difficult. Text 20 to 25 are really just describing yoga realization, okay? They're describing all of that, the Brahman realization one can attain from the yoga process. And in 24 and 25, Krishna is saying, this is difficult. This is hard. It is not easy, right? And then we hear in text 26. So then what do we do? Because it is difficult, from wherever the mind wanders due to its flickering and unsteady nature, one must certainly withdraw it and bring it back under the control of the self. This is success, right? This is success on the means of yoga, and it is very difficult. But if one succeeds in this, right? If one does this successfully, then in text 27, we hear the result. And now we come back to the transcendental happiness that we're hearing about from samadhi, from Brahman realization, okay? This is the Brahma Bhuta platform. And in many ways, this Brahman realization, it's more a realization of the self, right? Coming to Mrugank Prabhu's question. I don't know if we have a capital S self here. No, we don't. But in the Sanskrit, we don't really either. Brahma Bhuta is a realization of the self. Why? Maybe we can have Sri Mataji. Would you like to read out the English?
The yogi whose mind is fixed on me verily attains the highest perfection of transcendental happiness. He is beyond the mode of passion. He realizes his qualitative identity with the Supreme, and thus he is freed from all reactions to past states.
Yeah. So this is the Brahman platform explicitly, right? Do mayavadis go nuts over this chapter? They do until they finish it. And then because the ending, Krishna basically says, oh, forget all of this, just become my devotee. So this is mayavadis. Well, actually, the thing is, mayavadis themselves really struggle with this chapter because it refutes them. But Brahmavadis, you might remember we made this distinction of maybe a month or so ago. The mayavadi thinks they become Krishna and that Krishna is illusion. And they struggle with this chapter because it still says devotion is great, right? But the Brahmavadi, the ones who want to merge into Brahman, but realize that Krishna is the transcendental absolute, they love this chapter because this chapter is very much describing the process by which they use. Does that make sense, Alex? So impersonalists who realize that Krishna is a person, they love this chapter. But impersonalists who don't realize that, who think that Krishna is impersonal, they really struggle with this because, well, we'll see when we get to the final part. Like, it's very, very explicit. Okay. So, yeah. So this section here, this is describing the Brahma-bhuta platform, which is self-realization and which is also described as Brahman realization, right? Realizing the existence aspect of Krishna, right? So actually, Mrugank, maybe if you want to write on the notes, unless you haven't got them out yet. Okay, yeah. 27 is Brahma-bhuta, the Brahma-bhuta platform, okay? You've realized Atman. But it's only mentioned briefly. And there's a reason why it's only mentioned briefly, because this isn't actually the apex of the Ashtanga Yoga system, right? The apex of the Ashtanga Yoga system is to realize the Paramatma form. And it's funny because one realizes the impersonal aspect by meditating on their on their self, right? On the personhood of oneself, you meditate and then you realize this sort of impersonal aspect. But it only gets mentioned briefly because then the next platform, the Brahma Sansparsha platform, is from 28 to 32. So the remainder of our description of Ashtanga, this is the finish, we finished really discussing Ashtanga Yoga in terms of a practice. The remainder of the chapter is now talking about difficulties with the Ashtanga Yoga process, okay? So the remainder now of our discussion, 28 to 32, 4 shlokas, is entirely describing Paramatma realization. Krishna is making it explicit. Meditation is not about the breath. Meditation is not about realizing the self. Meditation is about realizing the super self, the Paramatma, the over self, the supreme self, the super soul. It's not just about realizing the soul, it's about realizing the super soul. We might remember this from chapter 2. I would be surprised if you remember it, but if you've been very diligent, we discussed this. Our acharyas describe samadhi as realization of 2 things, both oneself and the supreme self, the supreme person. And we find this is not just, because I do want to stress this, sometimes people think, oh, well, you know, the devotional acharyas, they're just making stuff up as they go along to categorize things. These are distinctions that we find throughout the Gita. It's right there, right? How does Krishna, when Krishna begins to discuss the perfection, right? He's discussed the means to attain perfection. He gives 1 text for Brahman realization and then immediately goes to 4 texts on Paramatma realization. So Paramatma is essential to samadhi, and samadhi is, of course, perfection of Ashtanga Yoga. So what do we hear then? Text 28. Oh wait, Srikanta Sena Dasa sent something. And the one who doesn't control. Yes. Very much, that's a good point. Maybe Uma Mataji. Would you like to read text 28? I've shared it on the screen. If that's easier for you, then
I'm reading from the book, Prabhu. I have the book with me.
Oh, Jai, go ahead.
Yeah. Thus, the self-control yogi, constantly engaged in yoga practice, becomes free from all material contamination and achieves the highest stage of perfect happiness, in transcendental loving service to the Lord. Thank you, Prabhuji.
Jai. So here we find there is a realization of Paramatma, right? There is an understanding about the personal form of the Lord, right? And so this person is now at a liberated platform, even in this life. There would maybe some of you who are from a more yogic background. Anyone? I remember Tarun Prabhu was saying you were doing like Kundalini yoga or something, and Srikanta Sena Prabhu, as you know, has been sharing that. You often hear in those circles Jivan Mukta, right?
Oh, more of a tantra than.
More tantra. Oh, my memory wasn't. I wasn't sure. Tantra also does a bit of this sort of stuff. But the Jivan Mukta, maybe we would have heard of this. Somebody who is liberated even in this life. Sorry, I'm just moving my foot. The Jivan Mukta, even in this life, he is liberated. Okay. And then we hear for text 29 to 30. Now we hear essentially the description. So maybe from Mrugank, you want to get the notes up. 20 of these sections of 28 to 32 that are describing the Paramatma realization, 29 to 32 are describing what is the nature of this person who has realized the Paramatma. Okay, what is the nature of this personality? 29 to 30 refer to how he sees the world, and 31 to 32 refers to how he acts in the world. Okay. So we hear the description now, right? What is the nature of this person who has achieved perfection in Ashtanga Yoga? Now we fully, as I say, we have the yoga ladder and there's a ladder within the ladder. Now we've climbed the Ashtanga Yoga ladder, right? And so now Arjuna will ask a question and we can resume discussing the overall yoga ladder, okay? Because at the top of the Ashtanga Yoga ladder, it is this, it is Paramatma realization. And what is that person? I'm just going to recite the Sanskrit because these are famous texts, right? And then maybe somebody can read out. Mrugank, don't worry about it. You can keep writing the notes. I'm just hoping people have their Gitas with them. Maybe Vidhi Mataji, do you have your Gita with you?
Yes, Prabhu.
Okay, I'll read out the Sanskrit for 29 and you read out the English, okay?
Sure.
Sarva bhutastamatmanam sarva bhutani chatmani kshate yoga yuktatma sarvatra sammadarshanaha.
A true yogi observes me in all beings and also sees every being in me. Indeed, the self-realized person sees me, the same Supreme Lord, everywhere.
Jai. How practical does this sound for Arjuna, right? When you're on a battlefield, or what better to do than to see everyone equal? Actually, this sort of consciousness will help him, but it seems a little abstract, a little difficult. Then we hear the next text, which I'll also say the Sanskrit of, and then maybe we can have Jaswanth Prabhu. Would you like to read out the English after I say the Sanskrit? Or have I already asked Jaswanth Prabhu?
No, Prabhu, you didn't.
Okay. Yo mam pashyati sarvatra sarvam cha mai pashyati tasyaham na pranashyami satcheme na pranashyati. This is very famous. It's one of my favorite books. Yeah, good.
For one who sees me everywhere and sees everything in me, I am never lost, nor is he ever lost to me.
Jai. What a very nice text. This is one I think is very wholesome, right? And this one very, very much speaks to the devotional, to the devotee as well. This is very much more true for the devotee than it is even for the Ashtanga yogi, right? But it's also true for them, right? Because one who is constantly seeing Krishna in all things, well then Krishna, he is always perceiving them, right? Because to meditate on the Paramatma is not a one-directional thing. Yes, I know which one you're referring to, Mrugank. I also can't remember exactly which text, but it's around text 28. And in chapter 9, it's almost nicer because it's within the Bhakti context, right? So a true yogi observes me in all beings and also sees every being in me, right? Because Krishna, he is present in the heart of all beings, right? And all beings are situated in Krishna's creation, right? And they are all emanating from Krishna, right? Okay. But we must also remember this is Paramatma, and Paramatma is personal. So this is a paramatmic realization. And then we hear text 31 to 32. So how does this person act? Such a yogi who engages in the worshipful service of Supersoul, knowing that I and the Supersoul are one, remains always in me in all circumstances. He is a perfect yogi who, by comparison to his own self, sees the truer quality of all beings in both their happiness and their distress, O Arjuna, right? So this is it. This is the full symptom. This is the equal vision by which the Paramatma yogi, by which the Ashtanga yogi sees the world, right? And Srila Prabhupada writes, either in this purport or in a later purport, that this is very, very difficult vision to have. I don't know any of us who would say it's very easy to treat all beings equally, right? How many of us can treat our enemy the same way we treat our friend? Do you get what I mean? This is very difficult. And all of us experience this. Unless you're at a relatively high level of Krishna consciousness, we all know that one devotee, every time we see them, we want to smile, but it's a little bit difficult. You know what I mean? The smile doesn't come naturally. In order to keep Vaishnava etiquette, we smile, right? This is difficult, right? But it's also necessary. But hearing this difficulty, again, I love the Bhagavad-gītā because Arjuna, he's not just saying, okay, I will do this and he'll go ahead. He's expressing what we all feel. And so we'll discuss his question 33 to 34, and then we'll have our 5-minute break. And then we'll come back and we'll quickly finish chapter 6, okay? Because what is Arjuna's question? Arjuna's question is A, as Srikanta Sena Prabhu said, there's no kusha grass here. I left my deerskin at home. I'm not going to sit down and meditate here, right? Secondly, this level of vision is very, very complex and very difficult to uphold. Krishna, you've literally said, this is very, very hard. With strong faith and a strong level of endeavor, step by step, you will realize it, right? You've pointed out that this is difficult. And thirdly, how am I meant to fight a war if I'm thinking in this very transcendental mindset, right? And so thinking all of these things, Arjuna then asks his very, very good question. O Madhusudan, the system of yoga you have summarized appears impractical and unendurable to me, for the mind is restless and unsteady. The mind is restless, turbulent, obstinate, and very strong, O Krishna. And to subdue it, I think, is more difficult than controlling the wind. I'm sure we've all had this experience, right? I quoted St. Paul last week. I'm going to quote him again, right? St. Paul, he has this beautiful verse which just summarizes our whole condition, to me at least, right? What I want to do, I do not do. And what I do not want to do, I do, right? This is the nature that we're in, right? How many of us have experienced this? What does the mind do? Oh Lord, give me chastity, but not today. Yes, that's St. Augustine. He has a very famous prayer, right? In the Confessions of St. Augustine. Augustine, he lived a very fun life, if you read that book. Augustine lived like nearly 2,000 years ago. And yeah, he was famous for praying, give me chastity, but not yet. Let me continue to be unchaste for a little bit longer, and then I will be chaste. Yeah, so we find all of this, right? Because the mind is so hard to control. What is the job of the mind? Mrugank Prabhu, if you get the notes up, we'll discuss 33 to 34 is Arjuna's question. So the rest of the chapter I really like to break down basically into two sections. They're the two questions of Arjuna. We have the first question, which is text 33 to 36. And that's Arjuna's question about the difficulty, about controlling the mind, right? Yeah, 33 to 36. And then we have sections 37 to 45, which is Arjuna's question about failing, about the unsuccessful yogi. And then we have the final section, which is Krishna just glorifying Bhakti Yoga, which is 46 to 47. But really, this is now broken down. Arjuna, he's asking questions, okay? So Arjuna is asking this. And again, what are the two functions of the mind? Who can tell me? What are the two things the mind does? Who knows?
Contemplation.
Sorry?
Contemplation.
Oh, no, not the uncontrolled mind. I mean, it's contemplating something, but Lust and covet, yes, that's one of them. So it wants things. And what's the other thing it does? It wants things and it, Mrugank, it's 37 to 45. It wants thing, and what's the other thing the mind does? When you see something, what does your mind do? It either says, yum, I want it, or what does it say? Categorizes stuff? Yes, it does, and it categorizes it into two categories. Things I want and
things I don't want.
Things I don't want, yay and nay, right? So the mind sees things, and that's all it does 24/7. We are seeing things and we say yes, no, yes, no, yes, no. And it does it without our intelligence, right? We see a chocolate bar, we don't go, ooh, yum, I would like that, right? Well, I mean, we do, but we think that afterwards. Initially, we just see it and we want it. You know what I mean? Because our mind is out of control. And how hard is it to control the mind, right? We see on our desk, right? We see the controller for our PlayStation, and we see our university textbook. Our mind instantly sees the university textbook and goes nay, and sees the PlayStation controller and goes yay, right? Even though our intelligence is telling us, I want to pass the exam, right? The mind is just going ahead, it's doing it. Sri can't relate. Sri always chooses the textbook. No, so like this, right? And how hard is it to control? Who of us really has experienced this, that we thought, you know what, this is better not to do, and I didn't do it. And we've only ever done this, right? So all that the mind does is it accepts and rejects, accepts and rejects. And how hard is it to control it? I think Arjuna has the perfect metaphor. Is more difficult than controlling the wind, right? Who can control what direction the wind blows in, right? None of us. We can try, but we will fail. And so it is very, very hard. Does this make sense? And therefore, Arjuna says, this seems very impractical and unendurable to me, right? I'm not going to be conquering my mind. This is very, very difficult. So this is sort of leading now. This is we're getting so close, like the anticipation is building. We're about to just explode into bhakti because we've reached the top of the yoga ladder, and Arjuna's saying, nah, that doesn't do it for me. So there's two ways we can read this. Remember, I'm doing a lot of references back to the earlier content we did, but who can we remember? Arjuna, he is both illusioned, but he's still a devotee. You can't undo one's devotional status. So from his illusioned perspective, Arjuna, he's saying this is too hard because I'm on the platform of Nishkama Karma Yoga, right? But from the perspective of devotee, he's saying, so he's from the sense of him being illusioned, he's underqualified for this, right? I'm too unqualified to control my senses. I need to do karma yoga. But from the perspective of his devotional status, right, of his nitya siddha form, he is overqualified for this because he's thinking, I'm used to jumping up and down in the kirtan, right? Not sitting down and counting breaths. You get what I mean? Not sitting down and restraining the mind. So we find this for the devotee, controlling the mind is not satisfactory. Our mind is controlled, but our mind is not controlled by self-discipline and by keeping our back straight and by sitting not too high or not too low. Our minds are controlled by dancing and singing in the kirtans, right? And by honoring prashadam. This is how our minds are controlled, right? By hearing the beautiful qualities and pastimes of Krishna, right? So Arjuna, in one sense, he's underqualified. And in that sense, he's saying, this is too hard for me. But in the other sense, he's overqualified. His devotional heart can't resist the fact that this is too dry. This is too dry. And so Arjuna, he poses this question. I think at this point is a good point to take a 5-minute break. So we'll take our break now. I'll see you all at 8 past. We're going to have a short break so we can have time to study. So I'll see you all at 8 past. Hare Krishna. Send any questions across if you have any. Did anyone have any questions before I resume? John. Okay, so, and the text 29, not to flip back just before the question, but text 29 to 33 is really, it's really starting to hint towards devotional service, right? Text 29 to what am I saying? 33, text 29 to 32, sorry, are really, really drawing out this sort of bhakti conclusion, right? We're hearing about how he sees me everywhere and sees everything in me, right? He worships me, right? And sees all beings in terms of me. Yes, it's not explicitly about bhakti, but as I've been mentioning, the Bhagavad-gītā slowly, it indirectly talks about bhakti bit by bit until we reach this section, right? And we see this in the pastimes of the devotees, right? If we see the perfected devotees, not to get all rasik on you, but when Krishna leaves Vrindavan, right? And all the gopis, they're waiting for him to come back and they can't bear that Krishna has left Vrindavan. What happens to them, right? They see Krishna everywhere, right? We are trying to remember Krishna, but the gopis are so perfected that they're trying to forget him and they can't, right? So this is the perfected level. And when they do see him everywhere, he does appear to them, right? They see Krishna on the tree, they see Krishna wherever they go. Mother Jashoda, it said that whenever she opens her eyes, she only sees all the places of Raj and she sees all the places Krishna has done as pastimes. And when she closes her eyes, she only sees the blackness of her eyelids, right? And that reminds her of the beautiful dark skin of Krishna. So no matter what, she can't forget him, right? So this text very, very much speaks of the devotional platform. And so we're really feeling this hinting of devotion. And so we can also feel that this is a reason why Arjuna right now, he's really asking questions that are really about to take us right to the Bhakti Vedanta conclusion. Okay, so we found Arjuna's concern. And Arjuna, he asks the question really interesting. In text 34, we'll find he says, "Oh Krishna," and he says it in the Sanskrit as well. Chanchalam hi mana Krishna. So it's very interesting. Arjuna, he's asked the question, he's given the problem, but he's also mentioned the solution alongside it, right? Because what is the solution to the uncontrolled mind? It is the beautiful name of Krishna, right? So he's mentioned Krishna Nam along with the problem and the solution, all there in text 34. But anyways, what do we hear Krishna saying? Krishna, he replies by saying, "O mighty armed son of Kunti, it is undoubtedly very difficult to curb the restless mind, but it is possible by suitable practice and by detachment." So Krishna, he affirms, right? He affirms the difficulty of this, right? He says, no, Arjuna, you're right. It is very hard. And what does he call Arjuna? Who can tell me? What does he call Arjuna? Maybe we'll get the text up, actually, if we open up text 35, because there's another point there's 2 points I want to make from the Sanskrit.
Pratha?
No. Good guess, because that's what he calls him most of the time. Mahabaho. Does anyone know why Arjuna is called Mahabaho? Sorry?
Mahabahu, because he's like a brave, probably, I know his son had long
arms. Strong arms?
Yes, strong arms, but why? Does anyone know why he was given this title?
Oh.
It's because he wrestled and defeated Shiva, right? So then he was given the title Mahabaho, right? So Krishna, he's saying, you wrestled with Shiva, but trust me, even wrestling with Shiva is nothing compared to wrestling with the mind. You will truly only be called Mahabaho, the really strong one, you know, the master of wrestling with the strong arms, if you can wrestle the mind. You can wrestle 1,000,000 warriors, but you are only a mighty armed one if you're able to tap the mind in submission. So therefore he says this. Now this text, it mentions 2 words that often get quoted on. They're the 2 aspects by which the mind can be controlled. Who can find them? I'm throwing the question out there. Who can find? What are the 2 ways by which the mind can be controlled?
Abhyas,
Yes, exactly. Perfect. Nailed it. Abhyas and vairagya. Abhyasena and vairagyena in the Sanskrit. They're in the instrumental. So, abhyasena and vairagyena. By practice and by detachment, the mind can be controlled. So these 2 aspects in yoga, right? These are the two limbs by which the mind is controlled. Okay, so if we keep on going then, text 36 elaborates on this point, and I'll discuss a little bit more about Abhya Sena. I didn't just bring it up to drop it. Maybe we can have somebody else read the text out. Mrunal Mataji, would you like to read out the text?
Yes, sure, Prabhuji. For one whose mind is unbridled, self-realization is difficult work. But he whose mind is controlled and who strives by appropriate means is assured of success. That is my opinion. Hare Krishna.
Yes, Jai, very nice. So Krishna here, he's made the final conclusion, right? Dealing with the four types and deal with practice and detachment. Yes, that is interesting. So Krishna's conclusion is what? He whose mind is controlled and who strives by appropriate means is assured of success. So we find this motif continues along there, right? With suitable practice and with detachment. So with all of this, the goal can be obtained. Of course, for a devotee, it becomes a little bit more complex, right? Because the Bhakti Marg is also very much the Marg of Prasad. It's the Prasad Marg, right? It is the Marg of, it is the path of grace, right? So we have this very interesting dynamic where we both must act, but also we are fully surrendered to the grace of Guru and Gauranga, right? Now it's interesting because this text also can appear to bhakti, but what do we hear in terms of bhakti? We don't hear, oh, by suitable practice, we can achieve our goal. We hear only by the mercy of Guru and Gauranga can we progress, right? So how do we understand this? On the one way, we can understand it, that this is about Ashtanga Yoga. And in Ashtanga Yoga, grace isn't enough. You've also got to have your discipline, right? And that is true, right? So in the one sense, this only applies to Ashtanga Yoga. But this also applies to Krishna consciousness in the sense that when we receive the grace, what is the sign of that grace? Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, he actually says this. Grace is seen by when one acts in devotional service. So the fact that one actually acts is the result of grace. What does it mean for one to have received grace? The reception of grace means that one is performing suitable practice and is having detachment. They are one and the same. Grace is the cause, and practice and detachment is its realized effect. Does this make sense? If not, don't worry about it. It's not an essential point. I just think it's interesting. Okay, so let's keep on going then. So having heard this, now Arjuna, he asks again a very, very practical question. And this is a question that many people wrestle with, right? Especially those who are contemplating taking up Krishna consciousness very seriously, right? Because if one takes up Krishna consciousness very seriously, the odds are they won't end up a millionaire. Actually, by Krishna's mercy, they won't end up a millionaire. To be a millionaire through endeavor is very much a curse in one's spiritual life. Everyone knows the four regulative principles, right? The chapter by which we get the four regulative principles from is from the first canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. Does anyone know this pastime?
Probably the regulative principles.
Yes.
Is it of Kali, the person who's killing the bull?
Yes. So Kali is killing a bull, just completely beating it, right? The bull of Dharma, right? And he's beating it. And as he's beating the bull is standing on one leg, Satya, and that leg is starting to waver as well. All of the other aspects of religion have faded away in Kali, right? Because in Kali Yuga. Why? Because Kali is beating this bull, right? And so Parikshit Maharaj, he sees this and he pulls out his sword and he's about to kill him. But Kali, not Kali, by the way, for those of us who might not Kali, the form of Durga, Kali Yuga personified, right? And so he because he's just a coward, right? He instantly just falls down like this and he begs Parikshit Maharaj, please spare me, right? Because Parikshit Maharaj is about to, as we're hearing about Arjuna, it's his duty to protect the realm. And so he has to attack this person for so brutally attacking the bull, right? And so Kali, he goes like this and he says, please don't slay me. And of course, it is incredibly dishonorable and revolting to kill somebody who has surrendered to you or who's asking you for shelter. So Parikshit Maharaj, he's not going to do it, obviously. So I'm just abbreviating the pastime. It's a longer pastime. So he comes to a conclusion that he'll banish him, right? And where will he banish him? He'll banish him to the slaughterhouses, therefore no meat, right? He'll banish him to the brothels, therefore no illicit sex. He'll banish him to the gambling houses, therefore no gambling. And he'll banish him to the liquor houses, therefore no intoxicants, right? But devotees always forget there's another place where he gets banished to as well. And that is where, pardon?
Money?
Money, yes. He gets banished to where there is gold, right? So sometimes devotees, they will like to skip over this last part, right? They want their bhakti yoga with their 20 investment properties. But unfortunately, wealth is something that's very non-conducive to spiritual life. That's not to say that one should become a hobo, right? Especially if you're a grihasta, which is 90% of us, right? You need to work in order to make money, right? But it's a fine line. Am I working to make money to support my family, or am I working to make money so I can have a Lamborghini or whatever, right? Ye average sports car, right? There's a very fine line. And the second one is, the Lamborghini, I just mixed together the Maserati and Lamborghini. I'm not that transcendental, unfortunately. So we find this money, the successful career. Yes, Alex, you're allowed to work. How do I put it? I would be a hypocrite if I said you can't make money to buy books, because that's pretty much the only time that I'm working. The only time that I get greedy for money is when I realize there's an expensive book that I want. So technically no, but it would be hypocritical for me to get up you for it. If any of you have seen my bookshelf, you'll see lots of books that I definitely didn't need, that I just blasted my money on. Anyways, so we find this, right? So again, making money is not that you should feel guilty, but making a lot of money is very non-conducive to spiritual life, right? And therefore, Arjuna's not thinking of this specific thing, but just by the very nature of it. If one takes to Krishna conscious seriously, they are not going to have a successful career. That is just the nature of it, especially in this world, right? So Arjuna asks the very practical question, right? If I take to this path seriously, right? And one can have a successful career and be associated with Krishna consciousness. I'm just saying that Krishna consciousness won't be very serious, and that's fine, right? If that's what they want to do, that's what they want to do. Zero judgment, right? But to seriously perform this, then you have to realize, I likely won't end up becoming CEO of Google, right? Okay, so now he asks the very, very serious question, which is, well, what happens then if the mind is so hard to control? What happens if you mess up, right? Sure, I can understand giving up material success in order to have spiritual success. But what if, because of the difficulty of the mind, I don't have spiritual success either, right? What happens then? And this is a very legitimate concern, right? I mean, George Harrison was rich and had a successful career, and he had something of a good spiritual life, but one second. But we can also consider a few factors with that. I think, firstly, that's a very extraordinary case. And secondly, he was very rich before coming up to spiritual life, if you get what I mean. So I'm not saying that riches inherently mean you can't become a devotee, right? We also see Ambarish Prabhu, right? The descendant of Henry Ford, right? He's very, very rich, and he's using all that money in Krishna's service. What I'm saying is the striving towards material success is contrary to it, right? And unless you're already a billionaire, you're not going to get there without the strong striving. Definitely within our current, neoliberal sort of capitalist arrangement, but definitely also back then. Does that make sense, Alex? Yeah. So Arjuna, he asks this question. And then, oh mighty Aunt Krishna, does not such a man who is bewildered from the path of transcendence fall away from both spiritual and material success and perish like a riven cloud with no position in any sphere? Again, beautiful imagery to conclude our first 6 chapters, right? Does he become just like a little cloud that breaks away and then just disappears, right? Does he achieve nothing, right? Because he makes no spiritual success, he makes no material success. Of course, now Krishna, he'll answer. And his answer really concludes now our discussion of the 6th chapter, okay? What does Krishna say? Maybe we can have, who have I not asked to speak? Alex, would you like to speak? Would you like to read out text 40?
Yeah, sure. The Blessed Lord said, Son of Pritha, a transcendentalist engaged in auspicious activities does not meet with destruction either in this world or in the spiritual world. One who does good, my friend, is never overcome by evil.
Jai. Well, firstly, we find Krishna, he appeals to this very, very beautiful spiritual principle. One who does good is never overcome by evil, right? This is relevant to all yogis, but especially to devotees, right? Whenever we wonder, whenever we feel discouraged, we must remember that if we are doing good, we are never overcome by evil, right? We can have that security that ultimately good does win over evil, right? As much as it seems contrary to our experience. If we hold to our spiritual path, if we hold to our faith in the Supreme Lord, then that goodness is never overcome by all the evil in the world. So whoever does good, they are never vanquished by evil. This is very comforting, I find. And Krishna, he is appealing to that principle that we touched in chapter 2. There is no loss or diminution among this path, right? Whatever you gain, you will keep. And whatever you gain will protect you from the sufferings of this world. So Krishna says, from either perspective, right? You will not meet destruction either in this world or in the spiritual world. Either way, you will be preserved. And so in order to illustrate this point, he discusses in text 41 and 42, if Mrugank can get to the notes, he discusses 2 types of yogis. He discusses the yogi who has done a tiny bit of practice, which is in text 41. And in 42, he discusses the yogi who's done a lot of practice, because they both have different destinations, right? So what do we hear? If somebody can read out from their Gita, text 41, maybe we can have Divyansh. Divyansh, please read out text 41.
Yes, Hare Krishna.
Yeah.
The unsuccessful yogi, after many years of enjoyment on the planets of the pious living entities, is born into a family of righteous people or into a family of rich aristocracy.
Jai. So the yogi who has done a tiny bit of practice, he still has some material desires and all. So what happens is he'll take birth in the heavenly planets. And the heavenly planets are good in one sense, in that you can really have all the sense gratification that you want, but it's not contrary to religious principles, right? You're not exactly going to go there and like not to be crude, but there are no brothels in the heavenly planets, right? There's none of this gross, sinful sense gratification. I always get worried when I glorify the heavenly planets that a few, especially the devotee youth, I find, they hear this and they think, oh, well, why would I want to go to the spiritual world when I can go to the heavenly planets? Because it's very, very fun. They say the most beautiful woman on earth looks like a frog compared to the women in the heavenly planets. Now, yeah, and I'm sure that they say the same about men. The most beautiful man looks like a toad compared to the least beautiful man, in the heavenly planets, right? You just want to go to the planet of the trees, don't we all? anyways, I'll tangent so hard on Planet of the Trees comments. Anyways, I'll restrain my tongue. We can discuss that in question time. Okay, so the unsuccessful yogi, so he goes there, he gets to experience his sense gratification, and then he gets born into a righteous family or into a rich family, right? Now you might wonder, why is this? For two reasons. One, he still has that material affection, and that's a good place to do it. Secondly, it's often easier to continue because, again, you don't lose any of the progress you make in spiritual life. It's easier to continue when you're in a position of comfort, right? So it's sort of a combination of the two desires of the immature yogi. The immature yogi still wants material gratification, so he gets it, right? But he also gets the opportunity to continue his practice. However, the yogi who has practiced for a longer period of time, I'll just read the text out. He takes his birth in a family of transcendentalists who are surely great in wisdom. So certainly such a birth is rare in this world. Please, if you haven't already, read the purport to text 42. It's very sweet. Srila Prabhupada talks about how he was very fortunate to have been born in a family that was very wise, and so was his spiritual master, right? I think it's just very cute to see, very cute in a wholesome way, right? To see Srila Prabhupada sort of reminisce about his childhood. So it's a very nectarian purport. Please read it. And so we find this, right? Because the more mature yogi, he doesn't really have desire for all this material gratification. He just wants to take birth and keep going with it, right? Yes, and Alex, what you said is exactly true, right? So they exercise all their desires, and then they sort of think that's enough of the heavenly planets. Let's go back, right? They sort of execute their desires and then they come back down. Yeah, the heavenly planets are mainly a place to fall down. Very, 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 I would say virtually no one goes from the heavenly planets to the spiritual world. In fact, there's actually a certain place on the earthly planets where people who are from the heavenly planets, they go to transition back into Earth. I forgot the name of it. It's in Vedic cosmology. If any of you do 5th canto Bhakti Vaibhav, you might discuss it there. Okay, so because they don't really have any of those desires, they just keep on going. They just keep on going with their spiritual endeavor. However, in both cases, we hear text 43 to 44. On taking such a birth, he revives the divine consciousness of his previous life, and he again tries to make further progress in order to achieve complete success, O son of Kuru. By virtue of the divine consciousness of his previous life, he automatically becomes attracted to the yogic principles, even without seeking them. Such an inquisitive transcendentalist stands always above the ritualistic principles of the scriptures. So here we hear it, right? In both of these cases, right, he'll come back to his practice. It is easier for the person born in the family of transcendentalists, okay? Does this make sense? Because he isn't born with any distractions. He's straight up being born and he's hearing all about the different glories, right? He's hearing about the transcendental past. He's not hearing about money or about aristocracy or even about religiosity, right? Which is why it says above the ritualistic principles of the scriptures. Instantly, this person is not concerned with doing yagyas in order to be born in the heavenly planets. Because of his impressions, he automatically takes to spiritual life. And we'll see this, right? You'll see some people just boom, like they're born and then they're like, yeah, nah, I don't want any of this, right? They take instantly to spiritual life, right? So we can think either they were a devotee who didn't complete their path, or they were some sort of yogi who did not complete their path. And then we come to text 45, the final part, and really the conclusion of this Ashtanga Yoga section. And when the yogi engages himself with sincere endeavor in making further progress, being washed of all contaminations, then ultimately, achieving perfection after many, many births of practice, he attains the supreme goal. So even if one falls down, don't worry, eventually he will attain the supreme goal. And then now we hear Krishna, he comes to the point we've all been waiting for. Remember, I said last week when we discussed at the end of chapter 5, Krishna mentions Bhakti Yoga. He mentions mainly Ashtanga Yoga, but then he mentions Bhakti Yoga, okay? And so now Krishna, he says, to conclude his point, now we hear the yoga ladder. I've said it before, I'll say it again. The yoga ladder is an explicit part of the Bhagavad-gītā. This isn't just something we've made up to understand it. but it's better to know it before we reach the text that discuss it. And this is a text which puts it right in your face, okay? Right in your face is text 46. Krishna, now he is concluding. Chapter 6 is the conclusion, really, of our discussion of all the yogas. We will discuss the yoga ladder again, but nowhere near as much depth as we have over the past few months over these 6 chapters. And now Krishna, he's coming to the conclusion of all of it. And what does he say? Let's say the Sanskrit for 46 and 47. Mrugank Prabhu, if you click on this. Tapasvibhyo dhiko yogi jnanibhyo pi mato dhikaha karmibhyaschadiko yogi tasmad yogi bhavarjuna. Srikanta Sena Prabhu, would you like to read out the English?
Yes, Prabhu. A yogi is greater than the ascetic, greater than the empiricist, and greater than the fruitive worker. Therefore, O Arjuna, in all circumstances, be a yogi.
Jai, right. So we can see the yoga ladder there. I'm sure I don't have to point it out too much, right? We see the karma yoga, right? Which is the fruitive worker. This results into jnana yoga, right? Which then results into being a tapasvi, which then results in taking up to Ashtanga yoga, right? So we hear this, Krishna is saying, take up to yoga, become a yogi, right? And then, okay, I'm sure we can all see the yoga ladder there. And then we come now to the final text, the conclusion of all of these 6 chapters of our whole discussion, the conclusion of module 1. This is the perfect text to end module 1 on, because this text perfectly summarizes all that we've discussed. Now what has been implicit, what has been hinted towards our entire study, Krishna is going all the way out and he's saying it. Maybe Mrugank Prabhu, you can read out the English after I say the Sanskrit. Yoginam api sarvesham
Sorry.
Madgatenantaratmana shraddhavan bhajate yo mam same yukta tamo mataha.
And of all yogis, the one with great faith, who always abides in me, thinks of me within himself, and renders transcendental loving service to me. He is the most intimately united with me in yoga, and is the highest of all. That is my opinion.
Jai, right? Who can deny now? As Alex said earlier, no, not a bad habit at all. I do it in Bhagavatam classes under my breath. It's a good habit. As Alex was asking before, do mayavadis love this chapter? They love the first half. Once we get up to this point, it's game over for them, right? Because here's Krishna saying it. And again, look at the Sanskrit. This isn't just the devotees rendering. Bhajate, right? Explicitly, devotion is mentioned there. Yukta tamaha, the greatest of devotees, right? Shraddhavan, with full faith. And he's not saying the Brahman. He's not saying anything else. He's saying Mam, me, Krishna, right? Here we have it, Bhakti Yoga just exploding onto our screens, right? So we find it here, right? Yeah. The Mayavadi has to twist it out of context, right? Actually, they will say, if they want to say it's out of context, well, then I would ask them, the context is pretty clear. What has the verse said before? It's described who is greater than who is greater than who. So Krishna's put it in context. He's put it in the context of spiritual life, right? Krishna has just finished for the past 6 chapters contextualizing this one shloka. In many ways, we can say this is contextual. The whole past 6 chapters have just been spoken to speak this verse. Krishna has described all the levels, all of them. And then what does he say in text 46? He said, all of them are lesser than the yogi. And so the yogi is greater than everything I've discussed. And the greatest of the yogi is bhajate yo mam, he who worships me, right? Krishna is not mincing his words, right? Krishna is making it so explicit. There is nobody greater than he who is my devotee. And there's nothing greater than coming to the path of devotional service. I've described all of these things, forget them, just love me. Love me and be devoted to me, and we'll sort it all out. I remember, I'll share one story and then we'll do a revision activity. I don't know how many of you were there for the 50th anniversary of Sri Sri Radha Gopinath last year. But on the day of the anniversary, we did a Pushpa Abhishek. So the pujaris, all of the pujaris, they covered the altar in flowers. The altar was so covered, you couldn't even see Radha Gopinath anymore. You couldn't see, at one point you could see Krishna's beautiful, Gopinath's beautiful little peacock feather in his, and even that at one point got covered, right? His whole turban got covered. And you could see the flute pointing out, and even the flute was covered. The whole altar was just covered in flower petals. And what happened was, afterwards, all the pujaris, all the priests, they started taking all the flower petals off the altar, and they started throwing them into the congregation, right? But there was so many flower petals that it was literally like it was snowing flower petals, right? Like my ankle, my ankle was up, all the way up to my ankle was covered in flower petals. That's how deep the level of flowers were. And it was constantly raining down flower petals constantly, because there would have been like a lot of flower petals, right? And so what ended up happening is all the devotees, we started doing like a snowball fight, but with the flower petals. So we would get the flower petals and we started throwing them at each other. Everyone joined in, all of the devotees, the senior devotees, the junior devotees, everyone. The brahmacharis were running around throwing it. It was a whole lot of fun, right? And so it was just this beautiful, sweet, like wholesome moment, right? We were having a snowball fight, but with flower petals. And you could see the kirtaniyas, they were there with their harmoniums, and they were pushing all the flower petals off of the harmonium and everything, right? And so it was really, really just transcendental. It was just wonderful, right? And afterwards, because Narasimha Kavacha Prabhu, he was staying with me. I was speaking with Narasimha Kavacha Prabhu, and I was thinking like, somewhere there's some yogi who's sitting down, counting his breaths, you know what I mean? Like restricting all of his sense of joy and everything, right? And he's sitting down and he's just restricting his senses, and his nails are growing long, and he's standing on his hand or something. And he in his whole lifetime will only make the same level of spiritual progress that one person in the temple room that day made by throwing those flower petals at the other devotees, right? And Narasimha Kavacha Prabhu said, no, that's not true. And I thought, oh, have I misunderstood the yoga ladder? And Narasimha Kavacha Prabhu told me, he said that the Ashtanga yogi cannot even imagine the level of spiritual progress that one of the devotees made today just by throwing those flower petals at each other. This is the glory of Bhakti Yoga, right? The Ashtanga yogi, he cannot even imagine how much progress one of the devotees made in that temple room.
Sorry, Prabhuji,
yes?
Can you repeat that again, Prabhuji? The last 1 minute?
So the final point was that the Ashtanga yogi cannot even imagine the level of spiritual progress that is made in his whole life of Ashtanga yoga, in his whole life of discipline and practice. He will not be able to even imagine the level of spiritual progress that the devotees made that night, that one devotee made simply by throwing those flower petals once and enjoying the association of the devotees and appreciating Radha Gopinath. This is the glories of Bhakti Yoga. So on that note, this is also what Krishna is saying here, right? Oh, what's this video? Is this a video of that?
Yes, Prabhu.
Oh, Jai, does it have everyone throwing the petals at each other?
You can see the deities getting covered from head to toe.
Oh, okay, yeah. So you'll see the deities getting covered, but afterwards we had we were all throwing it. And I remember also I was talking to Narasimha Kavacha Prabhu, and I was like, because I joined in, and then at the end I was thinking, oh, was this bona fide to do this? I was thinking, am I going to get in trouble? Was this a seva parad?
Watch from about 9 minutes of that video.
Yeah, try. And I remember asking Narasimha Kavacha Prabhu, he said maybe somebody will say, but all the devotees were appreciating each other, and all the devotees were appreciating the Supreme Lord. I don't see how that can be an aparad. That was his response. Obviously, we can't take that principle and abuse it. But yeah, no. Just so I got a pretty high level of authorization that whole celebration was very bona fide and not some sahajiya nonsense. Anyways, on that note, we'll do a little bit of study. Just give me a second to break you all into your rooms. Actually, I'll pause the recording now because I don't think people will want to see me just organizing the rooms. Yeah, recording. Okay. So hopefully that made you all realize how easy the questions are. Don't worry. For next module, we're not going to do these revision sessions. I'm just trying to get everyone's nerves down. It's going to be easy. I'll see you all next week. Please have your webcams on. This is the only week where I'm going to demand webcams on. Please let me see your hands on the, in the video, and no virtual backgrounds. I'm giving you the heads up because I know sometimes you really do want virtual backgrounds. Get a background that you're comfortable not having a virtual background on. And then hurry. Like, that's it. You'll all do well. Try and we all have phones. I don't think anyone doesn't have a phone here. Take a photo of the test when it's done and send it to me.
Prabhu, are we allowed to take a 2-minute break in between? Because 2 hours of constant sitting, maybe you just want to grab water, just want to go to the washroom.
Look, I'm just going to trust you're not going to cheat. I'll let you take the break. Honestly, I don't think it'll take you guys the whole 2 hours.
Yeah.
I remember my one I did in 45 minutes.
That's the reason you're teaching us.
We don't have to giving us high goals now.
That being said, I did forget one of the 12 Mahajanas, so that's probably how I shaved a lot of the time off.
So is that going to be another question, Prabhuji? Third question?
No. I'm not going to ask you who the Mahajanas are because of my own trauma. I don't want you to go through that. Now, I might ask it in a later one. I am going to mix and match. There's some points in the syllabus that I'm going to touch in module 2, just because I feel like it flows better. I haven't been so strict to the syllabus. I will teach everything in the syllabus, but I'm teaching it slightly out of order. But yeah, so some questions from closed book 1 might be there, but I'll let you know if they are in the later tests. Okay. I see some people have unmuted, so go ahead with your questions, concerns, comments. Oh, okay. Are there any other questions? Okay,
Just a bit worried, tensed, Prabhuji, with the first exam.
No, I'm going very easy on you for all the first assignments. It won't be this generous. For the second one, I'm giving you 2 weeks to do your open book. We'll do the shloka test during the actual module, not at the end. And the closed book test will be the same. But yeah. I've been very soft on all of you for module 1. Module 2, no more Mr. Nice Guy, as they say. It'll be module 2 will be rough. It won't be. You'll all just realize it's easy and then you won't be scared. That's why. Okay, so don't be nervous. I'll see you all in a week. Practice. If you don't know what to practice, we need to do shlokas. Practice your shlokas rather than your closed book test. That's just my little study tip. Please practice your shlokas, get them down well. Get the English as well. People often focus on the Sanskrit because they think it's harder and then they forget all the English. If you need any help with anything, just message me. And then, we're all blessed to have Srikanta Sena Prabhu. Oh, if in my put, you would all be gone. No, I'm just joking. Okay. Good luck, everyone. I'll see you all next week. Message me if you have any problems. And I have to teach another class a little bit later. Today. So if I have time, I'll tell you all what time your shloka test will be later today. At the latest by tomorrow, you will know your shloka test days. Yeah. Okay. Hare Krishna. Is there anything else? Okay. Well, I'll see you all next week. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripasindubhyeva cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha ananta koti vaishnav vrinda ki jai.
Krishna Prabhu ki
Jai.
Nitai Gaura Premanande.
Hare Bol.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you.
Krishna Prabhu, thank you so much.
Thank you, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna.